Now for a sleep workshop with co-founder of the Sleep School and sleep specialist, Dr. Guy Meadows.
Okay, thank you, Kate. So welcome, my name is Dr. Guy Meadows. I am the clinical director of Sleep School, where our mission is to help the world to sleep better, to live better. So these are my micro steps to improving sleep, which I really hope that you will benefit from, enabling you to get a little bit of better sleep from tonight onwards and hopefully wake up feeling a little bit more refreshed. So let's get started. So number one is to stop struggling with your sleep. Now, this may sound fairly obvious, but at Sleep School, we spent the last 15 years pioneering a new behavioral therapy called acceptance and commitment therapy, where its main premise is the idea that often what we do when we can't sleep is we struggle against it. And, you know, if you've ever been awake in the middle of the night, you'll know that feeling where you're trying to get good quality sleep. And the more you try, the further away it goes. And that's because sleep is a natural biological process that we can't control. So actually what we want to do is just learn how to be a little bit more accepting of wakefulness and maybe some of the thoughts and feelings that can show up when we can't sleep. And by doing that, that removes some of the obstacles in the way of sleep. So that's the number one, just see if we can stop struggling with our sleep. Number two is to rest in bed if you find yourself awake in the middle of the night. So how you behave in response to nighttime waking is really crucial as to whether you fall back to sleep or not. Now, before we get into that, I just want to give you a little bit of the physiology around nighttime waking. And a lot of our clients at our clinic report this to be really helpful, and it helps to alleviate their anxiety. And this is the fact that it's actually perfectly normal to wake up in the middle of the night. So we sleep in cycles, which last an hour and a half to 2 hours long. Each cycle, we start off in light sleep, we go into deep sleep, and then we go into REM, and then we exit out of that. And we have a brief awakening, and that awakening will be 2 or 3 seconds, and then we'll go into the next cycle. And the average person, the average 7 to 8 hour sleeper, will have 4 to 5 cycles per night. So potentially 4 or so awakenings per night. Now, what can happen is that our annoying thinking mind can hijack those little awakenings, and it can suddenly make us become fully aware, fully alert. And especially if you've got something stressful or worrisome going on during the day, we can become sort of fully alert. And then how we behave is really crucial. So the most common thing for many of us these days is we grab our mobile phone. We suddenly check our mail, we check our social media. And that's a problem because not only because you get the blue light stimulation from the phone, or just light stimulation in general, and that can inhibit our melatonin levels and delay our ability to fall back to sleep. But then you might also get the cognitive or emotional stimulation from, you know, the text or news update or whatever it is that you're sort of engaging with. So we just want to be sort of really careful. And actually, at Sleep School, we recommend that if you do wake up in bed, you wake up in the middle of the night, you stay in bed and you rest, because you get a lot of benefit from just resting. And what we're wanting you to do is to cultivate a state of quiet wakefulness, because that is the state in which natural sleep emerges. It's kind of like a bridge state. So simple tip there, if you wake in the middle of the night, it's perfectly normal, and just aim to rest in bed. Okay, so what's the next tip that I want to give you? And this one is called labeling our thoughts. Now, if you've ever struggled to fall asleep or you've woken up in the middle of the night, I almost guarantee that one of the factors which has been part of that struggle has been your thoughts. And if you're anything like many of us, what you'll do is you'll try to get rid of those thoughts. You will try to block them, avoid them, suppress them. And what you'll find is that they tend to come in back in stronger, and annoyingly they bring their friends in with them as well. So you end up with even more thoughts than you had before, and that can be really frustrating. Well, actually, we know from the research that trying to get rid of our thoughts, it doesn't work. And that's why at Sleep School we have pioneered the use of ACT, or acceptance commitment therapy, which seeks to change the way you relate to your thoughts rather than trying to change the thoughts themselves. So what do I mean by that? Well, what I mean by that is helping you to have a little bit of perspective on your own thinking self, to be able to recognize what are thoughts. And thoughts actually are just bits of noise, language, images, sounds passing through our heads. And one little trick that you can do is to label them. So let's think about some of the common thoughts which keep people awake. It might be certainly sleep related ones. Will I sleep tonight? If I don't sleep, will I be able to cope or perform the next day? If I don't sleep, how will I feel? But there could be a myriad of thoughts around our health, our work, our finance, etc. And actually what I'd like you to do is to label them and then describe them. So see if you can just think about one common thought that shows up for you and then give it a shorthand label. So that might be, if I don't sleep, I won't be able to cope. It could be the coping thought, but it could be, you could be just the sleep thoughts or the work thoughts or the health thoughts, the finance thoughts. And when they come in, see if you can say this sentence to yourself. See if you can say, I'm noticing my mind telling me the health thoughts or the finance thoughts. And when you do that, that's really powerful, because when you say I'm noticing, well, if you're looking at something, well, that means you're instantly not in it. So you've created perspective. When you say I'm noticing my mind, that's even more powerful, because you're suddenly realizing that you are separate from your mind and you are separate from your thoughts. And just because they show up and tell you these things means we don't need to buy into and believe them. And if you can just add a little extra bit to that as well, where you just say, thank you, mind, at the end, well, that's where you kind of compassionately acknowledge that your worrisome brain is really just trying to do its job. Its job of trying to look out for what could go wrong in our lives. And that's what it's evolved to do. It's not trying to keep us awake. It's not trying to fuel our anxiety or make us self-stressed. So it's good to be a little bit compassionate towards our own thinking mind by just giving our thoughts a quick label, describe them, and that hopefully creates that little mental space between you and them, helping you to get back to resting in your bed. Okay, so what's the next top tip that I want to give you? And this is all about being present. So this again relates to where our mind is. You've probably noted that when you get into bed, your mind can race all over the place. And often, if you notice where it is, it might be in the past, thinking about the day that's been, or even further than that. So we're kind of time traveling in a way. And if we're not careful, we can be worrying about what's happened, ruminating over the day. Or it might be in the future, imagining what's going to happen, or like the mind likes to do, sort of catastrophizing, asking those what if questions, but what if, something happens tomorrow? And this highlights a really key point about our mind, is that we often spend a lot of time in the past and in the future, and very little time actually in the present moment. And so anchoring our attention into the moment can be really helpful as a way of just calming that busy mind. So how do we do that? Well, the simplest way that we use at Sleep School is we've got a lovely tool called Get Out of Your Head and Into Your Bed. And this is where we use the noticing senses sort of tool. So what I get you to do is to notice the sense of contact between your body and your bed. And so what you'll do is you might go, okay, I can feel the duvet touching my toes. I can feel the mattress touching my heel. I can feel the mattress on my calves. And you slowly work up all the way up to the top where you go, I can feel the pillow on the back of my head. And what we're doing is we're using that sense of physical contact as an anchor for our mind's attention. Now, of course, as we do it, our mind will race off onto all of those worries. And when they do, we acknowledge them, maybe even say, thanks, mind, for that thought, but then gently bring it back to noticing our sense of physical contact. And if you want to progress from there, then perhaps you can notice the movement of your breath as well. And again, you're not doing these to get to sleep. You're doing it as a way to simply ground your mental attention in the present moment and be able to notice when thoughts are coming in, but to let them pass like clouds in the sky and cultivate what we call psychological flexibility, which we know helps us to create the right mental environment for sleep to occur. Okay, so what's the next one? So the next one is rather nice. And this is all about being grateful for what we have in our lives, because life can be super challenging, and it's very easy for our brains to spend their time counting our burdens rather than our blessings. And actually, there's actually a good body of research which shows that if we spend time, just a few minutes, focusing on what we're grateful for in our lives, what we appreciate from our day, then actually that helps to cultivate more positive pre-sleep thoughts. So basically it creates a better, sort of more positive mental environment that helps us to fall asleep quicker and have better quality sleep and wake up more refreshed. So my request for you guys is, if you find yourself, sort of, well, perhaps as part of your wind down routine, so you haven't even switched off the light, you might like to write a journal. Just write down 3 things that happened to you that day. It might be, which you're thankful for. And it doesn't need to be big things. It could be just, I'm thankful for the fact that I have running water. I'm thankful for I have a roof over my head. Or I'm thankful for, my work colleague or my partner or my neighbor or whatever it may be. And as you do it, see if you can be specific. Why are you thankful for that event or that person? And then also see if you can feel the feelings of appreciation, almost savor them, because it's not often that we get time to really sort of pause and think about what we're thankful for in our lives. That's a lovely thing to do, perhaps just before turning out the light. Okay, so what's the next tip that I want to give you? Now, this is all about managing our difficult feelings, because it's really common for many of us to arrive at the bedtime and we might be feeling a bit anxious, we might be feeling stressed from the day that's just been, and whatever feeling is showing up, often that can impact our ability to get a good night's sleep. It might make it harder for us to fall asleep or sort of wake us up later. And so what we want to do is learn how to manage it. And just like our thoughts, lo and behold, the more you try to get rid of those strong feelings, if you've ever laid in bed, feeling super anxious, try to get rid of your anxiety, doesn't work. It just comes up bigger and stronger. And so what can we do? Well, this is again where we use this acceptance and commitment therapy approach, where we're increasing your willingness to experience those difficult feelings. And so how do we do this? Well, a super simple way is just to describe them in a really neutral way. So you might go, I notice I'm feeling anxious right now. I notice I'm feeling anxiety in my stomach. And then you might go a little bit further. You might say, I'm noticing I'm feeling anxiety in my stomach. It's like a round ball. So you give it a shape, maybe a color. It's red and fiery. Maybe it's got a temperature. Well, it's super hot. And what we're learning to do there is we're actually learning to spend time actually neutrally, objectively describing that physical discomfort. And that's a world away from trying to suppress, block, and get rid of. And this is super powerful. And the research is fascinating, because what we actually know is when you spend time verbally describing your discomfort in that way, well, then what happens is you move yourself from your amygdala, which is this emotional center responsible for our threat and sort of fighting and flighting, to our prefrontal cortex, which is this modern rational part of the brain. And what that does is ultimately, by describing our discomfort and our pain that we're experiencing, it's telling your brain that you are safe. And with safety comes sleep. So that's hopefully a really helpful tip for managing any difficult feelings that are showing up. Okay, so here's another tip, and this is one of my favorites, and this is to power nap. So if you've had a poor night, or perhaps you've just got, a large sleep debt at the moment, what can you do to repair it? And actually, one of the simplest ways is to have a short power nap lasting 10 or 20 minutes, ideally between the time of midday and 3 p.m., because that's where we get a natural dip in our core body temperature, which is really helpful for helping us fall asleep. And I mentioned that it's ideally between 10 and 20 minutes. You don't want to go longer than 20 minutes, because then you run the risk of going into deeper sleep, where you wake up, sort of with brain fog. So we're trying to keep it quite short. And a super top tip is, a lot of people will say, oh, well, I don't nap because I never sleep. And actually, what I would like you to do is to take the sleep part off the menu. Just use it as an opportunity to rest and be still. That way, you're lowering the bar of expectation and you're more likely to actually sleep. And actually, research shows that in 20 minutes, it takes 20 minutes into sleep, we can still hear, think, smell, taste. So actually, there's very little chance that you're going to know that you're asleep anyway. So if you are feeling that you need a little bit of a sort of a pep up in your energy levels, if you feel that you want to repair a sleep debt, then maybe have a bit of a power nap. Okay, so what's next? So the next is super simple, but possibly one of the most powerful. And this is keep a regular sleep-wake cycle. So you've probably heard that, go to bed and get up at the same time. But why is this so powerful? Well, it's powerful because we have an area of our brain called our internal body clock. And this is 20,000 clock cells located in an area of your brain called your suprachiasmatic nucleus, which is quite a fancy name, but for good reason, because it is possibly the coolest piece of biological machinery that we have. It keeps every biological process on time, your appetite hormones, your blood pressure, your heart rate, as well as when to sleep and when to wake. And lo and behold, this incredible internal timekeeper is kept on time by external timekeepers themselves, what we call zeitgebers. And so the biggest one is the rise and fall of the sun. So we need to be really careful around sort of, when we're exposing ourselves to light, etc. But also when you go to bed and when you get up. If you keep that regular, that helps to entrain the body clock to that particular time. So if you go to bed exactly at the same time, most, and when I say exactly, plus or minus 30 minutes is fine, most nights of the week, that will help to tell the brain, okay, that time is associated with falling asleep, and that encourages melatonin release, the sleep promoting hormone. And so you're more likely to fall asleep quicker. And if you wake up at the same time, again, you're more likely to wake up naturally feeling more refreshed. So super simple one there, but possibly one of the most powerful. And as well, it also impacts every other biological process. So it's absolutely worth doing. Okay, now we've got a couple more to go. So the next one is all about our lifestyle habits. So, and optimizing our diet. So actually, some of the simple ones, we know that caffeine is a stimulant. It stays in the system for anywhere between 6 and 12 hours. So we need to be aware of how much caffeine we drink. And I typically say have 2 or 3 cups of coffee or tea or whatever it is that you like to drink. But try to stop it from midday onwards, because that gives it enough time to get out of the system and reduces its impact on what we call our sleep drive, that sleepy brain chemical that ultimately is going to help us to fall asleep at the beginning of the night. Now, if midday sounds way too early for you, perhaps you can start, sort of at 3 p.m. and slowly work your way back. So that's caffeine. But what about alcohol? Again, another thing that we know that doesn't have a great relationship with sleep. So in general, I would say if we can avoid alcohol a few nights of the week, that's going to be really helpful for our sleep. But if you do like alcohol, then leaving at least a couple, 2 to 3 hours between drinking and sleeping should reduce its impact on our sleep. The problem is if we drink a lot of alcohol really close to sleep, then it fragments our sleep and it stops us getting into that really vital rapid eye movement sleep as well. And so we end up feeling sort of, groggy and not so good the next day. So see if we can manage our alcohol intake. And then what about diet? Well, diet, as you can imagine, our digestion is a colossal biological process, just like sleep. And sadly, digestion and sleep are not good friends. They need to be kept apart. And so if you're going to eat your evening meal, aim to leave at least 2 hours, but ideally anywhere between 2 and 4 hours between eating and sleeping. That ensures that you get that sufficient stomach emptying, that your gut is gone to bed, and then your sleeping system can take over. Because if you are eating too close to your sleep, then it will impact the sleep. But also, when it comes to what food, make sure that your evening meal is the lightest and the healthiest, and that will improve your sleep. So if you're a fan of a little bit of chocolate or something, see if you can move that to after lunch. If you're a fan of the sugar and the cakes, see if you can, again, move that to earlier in the day so that it doesn't impact the quality of your nighttime sleep. Okay, so hopefully that's some helpful tips to optimize your lifestyle. And then the final one that I want to talk to you about is, again, something that I'm a huge fan of, and that is keeping active and exercising. Now, what we know is that exercise is fantastic for sleep. And it does this for a number of reasons. So the most obvious is the fact that, well, if we go for a walk or go for a run or whatever it is we do, that's going to tire out our muscles, and that increases our sleep drive. So it helps us to fall asleep quicker, fall into deeper sleep as well. So that's good for sleep. But actually, when we look at exercise also is incredibly powerful for mopping up our stress hormones. And it appears that this is another really important way that our sleep is improved, because it helps. Exercise almost acts as like a neurological calming agent, helping to improve that sort of mental and emotional landscape from which sleep can emerge. Now, whilst exercise is good, it's important to recognize when you do it. Okay, so what we know is that exercise increases our core body temperature, and we need a reduction in our core body temperature of 1 degree in order to fall asleep. So aim to leave at least a couple of hours between exercising and sleeping to ensure we get that natural cooling and it doesn't interfere with our sleep. So hopefully that final tip will help you. So my final advice is I've obviously given you 10 top tips here, which I would hope that you would input into your life. But actually, all I want you to do is just to pick one and to do that for the next week, because I don't want you to change your whole sleep routine, because often that can lead to you becoming overwhelmed and maybe sort of feeling a little bit low, that perhaps you didn't do as well as you could do. So actually just take one, put it into action, allow it to become a routine, and then pick another and slowly build up these great new sleep habits. So I really hope that you've benefited from these simple top tips to improve your sleep. And I really hope that you will take at least one away and put it into your life. If you want to find out more about Sleep School, just simply go to sleepschool.org and you'll be able to find out everything that we do and how we help people. So take care, sleep well, and back to you, Kate.